Tennessee This Week from WATE's 6 on Your Side starts now.
Hello and welcome to Tennessee This Week. I'm Bo Williams. Former Speaker of the Tennessee House, Glen Casada, and his former Chief of Staff, Cade Cothren, have now been convicted of defrauding the state. The two were tried on federal charges tied to a money-making scheme where money was funneled into a political mailing group that state lawmakers used. Casada and Cothren will be sentenced later this year, and we're told they each face up to 20 years in prison. Now, State Representative Gloria Johnson joins us now. She sounded the alarm about the Casada-Cothren investigation when this case was just getting off the ground, and she was there at trial as well, bringing us some added perspective this afternoon or this morning. So again, thanks so much for coming in today, Representative, to join us. We should mention you're joining us while you're on vacation, so we appreciate you taking some time out to talk with us.
Happy to be here.
Yeah, let's talk about the case for a moment. Just overall in general, from beginning to end, are you happy to see this thing come full circle now and it is all wrapped up, and just kind of how you watch the whole process play out?
I mean, I'm not happy that it happened, certainly. It's embarrassing to me that there's such corruption in our state legislature, but I'm glad to see those people who are guilty be held accountable. Because it's very frustrating to me when just because of power, a person's position or power, where they're not held to account for breaking the law. And I think we are at a time in our history where it is critical that every single person is held to account for the laws that they break. And so I was happy to see a conviction in this case that was very clear cut that the law was broken.
And you were there. You saw how the trial played out. So kind of walk us through, for those of us that weren't there, were there key moments, anything that really stuck out to you?
Sure. I think that, one of the biggest things, of course, was the testimony from former Representative Robin Smith. She was the first person indicted, the first person to resign from the Tennessee legislature, and she was a part of the scam with Glen Casada and Cade Cothren, an integral part of it. And she admitted to her part in the scheme, and she helped the prosecution make their case and gave the facts and all of that. So it was interesting to hear her tell what happened. And just to be very honest about it, it was sort of shocking to be sitting in the courtroom and to hear the testimony and to hear how they lied to and scammed their friends and their colleagues. Wasn't scamming and lying to colleagues across the aisle. It was their friends and the colleagues that they work with so closely. So it kind of demonstrates what we see up there, demonstrates the corruption and how many people are up there for their own power and greed and not to benefit Tennessee families.
Yeah, and that's kind of what it comes back to, right? I mean, obviously there's going to have to be a trust factor there, and we'll talk about that coming up in a little bit. Was there anything else that popped out, maybe anything that hasn't even been released yet that stuck out to you?
Well, I think what was lacking in a lot of ways was the fact that a lot of people who should have been testifying didn't. I think the Speaker Sexton should have testified. I think that if he had testified to some of the things that he was a part of, people would understand a little bit more about who he is. Because the reality is, when a bribe was offered to Representative John Mark Wendell on the balcony to change his voucher votes, when Glen Casada offered him the rank of general to change his voucher vote, Cameron Sexton was standing there as well. So, and then apparently in the text chain and all of that, you find out that Speaker Sexton had Cade Cothren votes for him to become Speaker after Casada was disgraced. So what you see is a lot of folks that, up front, they said, oh, that's terrible. But behind the scenes, they were involved in a lot of the same corruption.
And for people who are watching right now that may be new to the area, new to this case, this all came back, was it Phoenix Solutions? I think that was the name of the company. Kind of give us a brief background real quick for those that maybe aren't familiar with what everything.
Yeah, that was another shocking thing. Phoenix Solution it was a consulting company, And Cade Cothren, when he signed on for the company, he signed the name Matthew Phoenix. Mm-hmm. And I think from what I gathered in the court hearing, Cade just sort of thought that Matthew Phoenix, it was named Phoenix Solutions because the guy's name was Matthew Phoenix. But Robin Smith had this big elaborate story of how, she named the company Phoenix because it was a phoenix rising from the ashes, because Cade and Casada were rising from the ashes of their disgrace to do something great for Republicans. And then she also used a Bible verse, Isaiah. She actually used the Bible to justify some of these things that they were doing, breaking the law. And it was just so shocking to me, her vision of why it was called Phoenix. She actually gave Matthew another last name, which she gave him the name Matthew Cyrus, because she was reading a book on a Persian king named Cyrus. So the elaborate lies that she came up with, and told people within the legislature, told their colleagues, oh, it used to be a D.C. consulting firm, and they got tired of being in D.C., so went back to New Mexico to open their own Phoenix Solutions, but they also had Tennessee ties. Just the elaborate lies that they came up with to disguise who was really in the company, and cheat their own colleagues or lie to their own colleagues. Their defense was that, well, we did the work. Yes, you did the work, but if people were to find out who was doing the work and that these politicians were using a company of the disgraced speaker and his fired chief of staff who did racist and misogynist texts, I mean, they would not have been happy. It would have looked terrible on those folks that used the company. That's why they lied about who they were and misled their own colleagues.
You mentioned at the very beginning, you kind of alluded to the fact no one is above the law. And again, this is a case that shows that. Moving forward, though, I know both lawyers said that they plan to appeal. There is the sentencing hearing, which is not set till, I think, September 12th, something like that. So how do you see this moving forward? What are you hearing also from your constituents after we've seen this latest verdict? What are you hearing from them as well as we're moving forward now?
From my constituents, I hear, what are they doing up there? Because if you heard the testimony in the court, basically, as soon as Robin Smith got elected and got up there, they started working on how they could make money. And, I think about it at the same time, that's when I went back in 2018, I started working on legislation for my constituents. I was busy working on legislation. They were busy working on a way they could make money off of their colleagues and their mail accounts and their campaign accounts, and how they can use that to give themselves more wealth. And most of us are up there, or certainly the folks on my side are up there writing bills to try to make Tennesseans' families better.
Is there something we can do to make sure, to let everyone know, and I don't care which side of the aisle you sit on, but to let people know that this isn't everybody. I mean, not everyone is going to be found guilty of some type of crime here. I mean, there are people trying to work together, and that we need to. How do we build that trust again in what's happening, whether it's in D.C. or in Nashville?
I think you build the trust by holding folks accountable, not letting them off because of their power or their wealth. Regardless of what position you are in, you need to be held to account. We saw it happen with Brian Kelsey. Brian Kelsey was in the Senate, and a couple of years before that, he got indicted as well and found guilty. He actually pled guilty and got sentenced to prison, and then he was pardoned after only 2 weeks of being there by President Trump. I believe that folks who do these crimes need to do the time, and what you're going to see when Casada and Cade say they're going to appeal, that's really shocking to me, because one of the things that was interesting about this case, they did not dispute the facts of the case, that they did fraudulently create this business and they did fraud their colleagues. They never disputed that. What they tried to say was, well, we did the work, but they broke the law. And so it's shocking to me that they're talking about appeals, because even their attorney said in court, I was sitting there when they said it, we're not disputing that these things were done, talking about the fraud. So to say they're going to appeal is really interesting to me.
Representative, we're out of time, and I know, as we mentioned at the top, you're on vacation, so we appreciate you giving us some of your time, and I'm sure we'll be talking about this as well as other topics in the future. We appreciate you.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. And stay with us. We'll have much more of Tennessee This Week after the break. Welcome back to Tennessee This Week. A moment ago, we heard from State Representative Gloria Johnson as she recounted what happened during the Glen Casada and Cade Cothren trial before the two men were convicted of defrauding the state. Now we want to bring in our panel of pundits to discuss what she had to say. Joining us now, Michael Covington, Julia Hurley, and George Corda. George, it's like The Godfather. You thought you were out, and we keep pulling you back in. So that's two in a row here, so good to have you back.
That's all right. I deal with a lot worse.
Okay, all right. Well, I'm going to let you start then. You heard from the representative. You've also seen how the trial has played out as well. So give us your thoughts.
Well, a couple of things. Number one, the two things that'll get a political figure in trouble faster than anything else are arrogance and money. Mm-hmm. And this seems to have been in abundance in this situation. And the reality is every Tennessee House Speaker looks in the mirror and sees a governor. Almost nobody in Tennessee knows who they are. So there's this among the players, particularly on Capitol Hill. I worked on Capitol Hill in Nashville for 3 years. And it's kind of a separate world. It's kind of its own universe unto itself. And people are always telling each other how important they are. And they're being told how important they are. And they're being told how powerful they are. And so they can sit around and get the idea, we can do this and we will be all right. But the problem that these people had, is Benjamin Franklin, who said very accurately, the only way 3 people can keep a secret is if 2 are dead. And you can't create an entity like this and then assume you're going to be able to carry it off in secret forever. It's but it's the kind of thing you can talk yourself into when you're in this isolated world of power and importance. And people outside of that world they're busy getting on with their lives, and you're not the most, you don't come to their mind that often. So that's how you think you can get away with this stuff.
Julie, you spent time in Nashville.
Mm-hmm. I served with Glen.
Right. So kind of walk us through as you were listening to that, as you've seen this, your thoughts after hearing what George had to say as well.
Yeah, a couple of things I noticed that's happening during this situation is there are a lot of opposing party members who are constantly stating, well, when you do something bad, you've got to, all these lawmakers that are breaking law have to come to the term that he's being served his term. He is being punished. Robin's being punished. Cochran's being punished. The law breaking happened. It is being acknowledged by the party in and of itself. It is being punished. It's happening. It's going to happen. Let's not assume that everybody that's served around Glen or was with Glen at any point is the exact same. So I feel like that's a discussion that's not even, it's a moot point. Obviously he's being punished. Obviously he broke the law. Obviously the state of Tennessee and the legislature are saying, the Republican Party is saying, we don't want this. We're not going to support this kind of behavior. Move on next. Another thing that I will say is, I don't necessarily believe in my heart from being there that every legislator that's elected wakes up and says, I'm a power-hungry person. And George is right. They get there and they have an idea of what it's going to be like. And it is this conversation around you of you can do, you're limitless. You have so much power, but really you're the only person that thinks that. This small group of people in this one building are the only people that will tell you that until you leave that building. No one knows who you are when you walk down the street in Nashville. But what I will say to that is these kind of decisions aren't made overnight. When a legislator is in office 20 plus years, the behavior pattern has been there before. This corruptness, this ability to make the wrong decisions consistently has always shown itself. The details have always been there. Other people did not pay attention to that because it may have served them at that point in time, and this behavior no longer served the other people. So he was eventually caught and put in place. But I will say, when someone's willing to act like that, they've acted like that for quite some time. That's usually a pattern. So,
Michael.
just thinking about how hectic it is in Nashville during session, and all of the people milling about, and everybody seems to have some purpose. The thing that comes to mind is that absolute power corrupts, absolutely. And Julia was alluding to that. Over 20 plus years, he's in the legislature. He's accustomed to making rules. The problem with this situation is when they were sitting around coming up with this idea, they didn't factor in the possibility that what they were doing behind closed doors was illegal. My guess is that had they had any sense that their actions, once they came to fruition, could potentially lead to 20 plus years in jail, I'd like to think they would have made a decision to go in another direction. But absolute power corrupts, absolutely. They couldn't see another way. All they could see is the success of the scheme they'd come up with. So consequences, repercussions.
I think if you don't know there's something wrong with it, you don't change your name, you don't domicile it outside of Tennessee, you don't run it the way they ran it, you don't send texts to each other saying, hey, let's keep our names out of this.
Right.
But that's what I was talking about, this idea that we're somehow untouchable. Mm-hmm. And if you have a character flaw, it will be magnified in that environment.
And it's also supported. That's the system.
So we're going to switch gears here a minute. We could continue to talk about this, but we do want to switch gears real quick and talk about Knoxville Mayor India Kincannon proposal for a half-cent sales tax increase to help fund infrastructure projects. Michael, is this needed?
For the city? Mm-hmm. Yes, it is needed for the city. The city always needs more money. But we're not always convinced that the way the city spends money is worthwhile. Statues, monuments, bike trails, walking trails, doggy parks. The Gay Street Bridge is closed. Let's put our priorities on those things that really matter to citizens. That bridge is important. Dog parks, another statue, maybe not. I just hope that the county commission and the folks at the county level don't take the bait and think that they need to act because the city acted. The city will tax indiscriminately. The county does not.
George, your thoughts? I know you've been a part of something like this before.
So. Well, actually, yes. I was responsible or charged with designing the campaign for the only, to my knowledge, successful sales tax referendum. When I was the mayor's press secretary, we were faced with one of two things: cutting the budget by millions of dollars or doing a sales tax referendum. And if memory serves, 6 of them had failed in the preceding 15 years or something. But Mayor Ash designed the program on this basis. He said, if we do this, we're going to get X number of miles of roads paved, X number of police officers hired, X number of exponentially more code enforcement, and quantified it. I remember one of the things I did, I got the city engineer, Sam Parnell, and I said, Sam, take me to the worst road in West Knoxville, the most pockmarked road. And it was Cheshire Drive. Mm-hmm. And so I went out and I looked at it and then had the mayor come out and do a press conference standing in one of the potholes and said, this will get fixed. And he went out and lined up a lot of people to support this thing that in the past would have been against that sort of thing. But here's what's going to happen if it passes. And there was a lot of opposition from the county. The county was fighting us tooth and nail. But ultimately it won with 63% of the vote. And so that, if you handled it right, if you communicate it right, reasonable people will hear and understand. But if you try to sell it on the basis of, we're going to put $10 million, I'm not criticizing, I'm just observing, we're going to put $10 million into affordable housing. That's not going to excite people Michael's talking about in the neighborhoods who are thinking, well, my sidewalk's broken or my road's not paved. So they're going to have to message this better than, look how much money we're going to spend if you let us spend this much money.
Right. Julia, kind of go along with that as far as how to sell this, get the message out. At the same token, when you look at what's happening even nationally, when we talk tariffs and things, prices seem to be going up, even though some have dropped a little bit, but in some areas. But is it a tough sell?
Yeah, it's a tough sell. There's too many things that are broken and not enough money to fix them, and you can't fix everything with a dime. So you can increase the taxes and say, we're going to create more infrastructure. You want to, yes. Can you? I don't know. And to Michael's point, the county doesn't need to follow suit, but they're going to feel the pressure to do so if there's an actual conversation and a move forward to those things. And to the point of affordable housing, seriously, the word affordable, Tennessee's not even ranked in the top 10 most affordable states with which to live at this point. The word affordable's off the table for the locals in and of itself. And every time we build an affordable housing complex, only 8 to 10% of the houses are actually affordable, while everything else is the luxury standard it needs to be to create an income for the people who own it. Let's be real about the word affordable for that. So if we're using tax dollars, I agree with Michael. It needs to be infrastructure and it needs to be sold for that. And I want specifics, just like George said.
Now, one thing is, as I recall, and I think the county will get into it in a heartbeat, back, I don't know if the law's changed, come to think of it, but city voters, when the county, we called it preemption, when the city, we passed ours, the county had a certain amount of time to get back in and preempt so it could get a share of the sales tax increase. Otherwise, all the money's coming to the city. Now, the county's not going to sit there and let the city do that, I don't think. But if city voters couldn't vote in the county preemption because they had already voted on it, and there was a big controversy about that. So whether they preempt or who can vote on it, that's a question I need to explore.
All right, Taylor, we're going to take a break real quick. We'll be right back with more Tennessee This Week. Stay with us. All right, welcome back, everyone, to Tennessee This Week. On May 27th, Tennessee resumed executions after a 5-year pause, executing death row inmate Oscar Smith. Let's bring our panel of pundits back in to discuss this. Again, it had been quite the hiatus, but again, we are back now to executing those on death row. So, George, let me get your thoughts after what has played out. I know they were trying to push Smith and some of the others that are on death row, trying to bring at least to get the governor to pause it. They had concerns, but obviously Oscar Smith's execution went through.
Well, it's been a long time coming. And last week I mentioned that one of the things I do in my business is work with law firms on major cases, and some of them have been capital cases. And it's also true that what we think we know, based on what we read or see, is very often not what is in the background that we can't see, that'll make you go, oh, I thought he was guilty, but maybe he's not. So you have to take into consideration the fact, when you're talking about capital punishment, that there are things you're just not going to know that the people who are reviewing the cases will know. And so, but I lived in Florida when Ted Bundy was on trial for killing, well, one of them was a 12-year-old girl whose grave I visited in Lake City, Florida. And if the governor had called me and said, we need somebody to throw the switch, my answer would have been, what time would you like me there? Because he deserved to die. It has to be really hard to put somebody to death, really hard, because there's no recall. But Tennesseans expect the death penalty to be the death penalty. And the Constitution provides that for capital punishment. Fifth Amendment references capital crimes. But this idea that the manner of that's not cruel and unusual. The manner is identified as cruel and unusual, and then you get into legal debates about what is and isn't.
No, we're short on time, Julia, but
I think we have a
thoughts?
couple of families here in Knoxville that would love to see justice for the death of their children, and I think there's a lot of people here locally in Knoxville who would support that happening sooner than later, so let's get it moving.
Michael?
They took too long to do the study over the drug that was not effectively taking these folks out. Now that they've resumed it, they need to get busy and be about the work of getting this work done.
Hey, real quick, because one of the things they were pushing, we have about 30 seconds here, was the fact they didn't think the new drug, those that were going to be executed, there was a problem with that. This one seemed to go fairly smoothly without any problems.
At the time the Constitution was written, capital crimes were mainly punished by hanging.
Right.
So the drug isn't cruel and unusual.
And on that note, we're going to wrap things up. Guys, as always, great to see you. Thanks a lot for coming up, sharing your point of view as always. We're glad you are spending your day with us as well. We look forward to seeing you again right here on Tennessee This Week. Have yourself a great rest of your day, and we'll see you next week.
The views of guests on Tennessee This Week are their own and do not represent the views of WATE 6 on your side or Next Star Broadcasting.